Chapter 1. Ricker looked completely uncomfortable. There was no question he was out of his element. It was a day he knew was coming for weeks, and he wasn't looking forward to it at all. But he knew it was one of the give and takes that he had to do if he wanted Mia to remain part of his life. After 3 months of talking and deliberating, they finally decided on a place to live together. His apartment. His bare walls, his scant furniture, the barely livable arrangements, they were all about to go. Replaced by pictures, more comfortable surroundings, and things that smelled nice. And he wasn't all that warm and fuzzy about it. "A little to the left?" Mia said. Recker closed his eyes and sighed, thinking if anyone saw him now, his reputation would take a severe hit. Well, maybe not severe, but he'd sure have to put up with a lot of ribbing and good-natured abuse. After all, hanging curtains wasn't exactly something anyone would ever expect to see him doing. He certainly never thought so. But it was the price he had to pay to be with the woman that he cared about, as long as nobody saw him do the homely duties. "One day I'm shooting people, and the next I'm hanging curtains," Recker mumbled to himself. Unreal. "What, honey?" Nothing. Which way you want these?" Though Jeremiah and his gang were now out of the picture, Recker didn't want Mia staying in her former apartment. He'd actually pleaded with her to quit her job and stay home. That way he could be sure nobody would ever try to take advantage of her again. But that flew on deaf ears. Though Mia loved and wanted to be with him, she wasn't going to stash herself away and become a vegetable. She loved her job, she loved helping people, and she was determined to keep doing just that. Recker still had concerns, but he knew it was a lost cause in trying to change her mind. It just wouldn't happen. So he did the next best thing. He taught her how to be elusive, how to become invisible. And it wasn't just for her safety, but also for his. Nobody knew where he lived, other than Jones. The last thing Recker needed was somebody following her and finding out where his home was. So they agreed that she would never drive straight home to the apartment after work. She would take a few extra turns to make sure there was nobody in her rearview mirror. Recker taught her which ways to go, and also how to spot if someone was tailing her. Over the previous month, he rigged up some practice situations where he used a different car to teach her how to not only spot someone following her, but also how to escape them. After a month of practice, Mia had gotten relatively good at the practice. She'd never be at a CIA level of elusiveness, but she wasn't half bad. He figured if anyone ever attempted to follow her after that point, they'd most likely not be as good as he was. And if they were, they'd most likely find him eventually anyway. She was at least good enough to satisfy Recker's worries for the time being. In any case, he'd continue working with her to sharpen her skills in the event she ever had to put them into use, which hopefully she wouldn't. Once the curtains had been hung to Mia's satisfaction, Recker stared out the window for a few moments. As he was daydreaming, Mia continued unpacking some of her things, as well as some new things she'd bought for the apartment. Recker's gaze was interrupted as he noticed Mia putting some small potted plants on the windowsill. He looked at her with a curious expression, almost like he wasn't sure what she was doing. "What's that?" Recker said. Plants? Why are you putting them there?" "To decorate the apartment," Mia replied, sensing that he was skeptical of her arrangements. "Oh. Would you like me to take them down?" No, it's fine," Recker said, though he really did have some reservations about it. "Are you sure?" He tried to make a face to indicate he had no issues, though not very well. "Totally." Mia smiled at him, thinking it was cute how he had hang-ups over a few small plants. "It'll be okay," she said, patting his shoulder reassuringly. "I'm fine. It's just I've never actually had plants before." "Don't worry about them. I'll take care of them." "Good. 'Cause I'm good at killing things. Plants probably included." Mia laughed and gave him a pat on the shoulder as she went back to some of the boxes that were littered along the floor. He turned around just in time to see the horror of her taking out a few pictures that were already in frames. He stood there dumbfounded, his mouth slightly open, as he watched her nail the frames to the wall. There were some pictures of her, some of him, and some of them together. "I need a case," Wrecker whispered. "I'm not made for this." After putting a few pictures up, Mia turned around to grab another one when she noticed the blank expression on his face. Though she was amused at how uncomfortable the simplest of things seemed to make him, she tried to be understanding and not show it. She knew the barren landscape of the apartment before she got there was likely how his places had looked for the past 10 years or so. It was probably all he ever knew. She walked over to him with a sad puppy dog kind of smile and put her arms around him to give him a kiss, trying to be as sympathetic as possible. Though Mia was enjoying herself immensely, she knew it was hard for him. Change wasn't something that Wrecker was accustomed to or liked very much. "It's going to be okay," she said. "I promise." Her affection briefly helped to alleviate his anxiety over his changing life. A warm look into her eyes was enough to ease the fears of any man, Wrecker included. There was just something about the way she looked at him that made him feel more secure in his changing environment, at least when her arms were wrapped around him. "When did you do all that?" Wrecker said, not aware that she ever had pictures of them made. "Well, the pictures of us were the selfies I took of us, and the ones of just you were just pics I took randomly. You've seen them before." "I know. I just didn't realize that you printed them out." "Is that a problem?" she said with a smile. "No. It just makes things seem permanent." "I can take them down if it makes you uncomfortable." "No, it's fine. I'm just not used to looking at myself on the wall," Wrecker said. Seeing the pictures of them together on the wall was a little jarring to him. In his mind, it was like a symbol of their relationship cementing. And though he still wasn't as comfortable with it as he tried to pretend he was, he knew Mia would be crushed if she had to take them down because of his uneasiness. It was just something he'd have to deal with. Once Mia went back to hanging more pictures, Wrecker started feeling uneasy again. He started to think that maybe he just needed to get out of the apartment for a while. Maybe it was just the process of seeing all the changes unfold in front of his eyes that fueled his anxiety. Maybe if he went out and everything was done once he got back, he would feel much better about the situation. He thought maybe it wasn't the actual changes themselves that was causing his worries, and if everything was already done, it wouldn't bother him as much. Wrecker pulled out his phone, praying that Jones had tried to call or text him. Even though he knew Jones hadn't, he hoped that somehow he just missed the call. Maybe he didn't hear the ringer as Mia was talking to him about something. Or maybe he missed a text message when he was in a trance over what seemed like a strange apartment to him. But as Wrecker checked, his hopes were quickly dashed. There were no calls, no texts. But as he continued to watch Mia alter his apartment, or as he needed to get used to saying their apartment, he knew he needed to escape for a while. Seeing he was supposed to have the day off, Mia was a little concerned when she noticed him looking at his phone. "Everything okay?" Mia said. "Oh, yeah. Yeah, everything's fine." "Then why are you looking at your phone like that?" It's David," Wrecker said, quickly thinking of something. "Yeah, he just texted me about something. I should probably call him back to see what's up." "You were supposed to be with me all day," she said, disappointed about what she suspected was about to happen. "Well, let me just see what he wants. Maybe it's not what you think." Wrecker walked into the kitchen as he called Jones's number, hoping that the professor had somehow come up with a new case. The actual move-in day for Mia had already been postponed a couple of times when newer, more urgent types of cases had unexpectedly popped up at the last minute. Jones had personally assured her the previous day that nothing was on the horizon. "David, I saw you called. What's up?" What?" Jones said. "So what's going on?" "Nothing's going on." "What call?" "I didn't call you." "Oh, well, is it serious?" "Serious? What are you talking about? Is everything all right there?" "Yeah, everything's going fine here. I'm glad to hear it. So you really think you need me, Recker said. Are we back to this again? What are you talking about? Yeah, I suppose I can be down there in a while if you really think it's necessary. Michael, nothing is going on. She'll be disappointed, but she'll understand. Do we have a bad connection or something? Jones said, looking at his phone in bewilderment. I can leave in about 5 minutes. Leave for what? All right. I'll see you when I get there, Recker said, hanging up. Jones sat there for a minute, trying to figure out what had just happened. He continued staring at his phone, lying on the desk. I hope he hasn't gone crazy after less than 1 day of being domesticated. Before going back into the living room, Recker looked at the kitchen cabinets and let out a sigh. He wasn't that proud of himself for what he was about to do, deceiving Mia like he was. But he figured on the importance level as far as lies go, this one would rank at the bottom of the list. As he thought about it for a few more moments, he actually convinced himself it was better this way anyway. Interior decorating wasn't his thing, and there wasn't much he could add. The only thing he could really do was get in the way. Mia would probably be better off, or at least faster, if she didn't have to stop every few minutes to massage his feelings over his changing apartment. When Recker finally came back in, Mia didn't need him to say anything. She'd already overheard his conversation with Jones. Recker had made sure that he talked loud enough for her to hear. By the look on her face, he could tell she wasn't pleased. She was just standing there looking at him, a picture frame in each hand, which were dropped down on each side of her by her knees. Recker started to open his mouth to explain before she stopped him. She lifted her left index finger off the frame and held it out in front of her so he didn't say a word. I know, she said in frustration, yet still somehow mustering a smile. You've got to go. I'm sorry. It's just that something's come up. I know. Something always comes up. Recker walked over to her to try to smooth over her frustrations. He put his hands on her waist and brought her closer to him, giving her a gentle kiss on the lips. Bribery will not get you anywhere, Mia said, though the kiss wiped away the look of displeasure on her face. Are you sure? Recker said, kissing her again. Well. Besides, you'll get all this done a lot faster if I'm not here. You know I'm not really helping here. I just wanted this to be a special moment for us. Recker knew it was important for her and took a moment to look around the room. This isn't what's special. These things are just things. The only special moment I need is when you're like this, when you're in my arms. You're lucky you're so good looking, Mia said, kissing him again as all her displeasure faded away. I think it'll be better this way anyway. You'll be able to do things the way you want without having to constantly look over at me to see if I'm hyperventilating. But what if I do something that you don't like? I'm sure that everything you do will be perfect, Recker said. Besides, the thing that matters to me most is that you're here. Everything else I can get used to. It might take some time, but I'll get used to it. Eventually. After a few more minutes of affection, Recker finally pulled himself away from Mia and went down to the office. And though she was initially disappointed at him leaving, she knew that everything would go by faster if he was gone. Not that her first priority was speed, but she didn't want to spend the whole day doing it either. When Recker got down to the office, about 30 minutes had elapsed since his phone call with Jones. Based on the strangeness of the conversation, the professor didn't know if Recker was actually coming or not. When he saw Recker enter the office, he stopped what he was doing and started peppering his partner with questions, wondering if he was losing his mind. Would you mind explaining what that phone call was about? Jones said, getting up from his chair to greet his friend. Oh, I, just needed to get away for a while. Get away? Are you two already having compatibility problems on your first day of cohabitation? Recker thought for a moment. What? Jones rolled his eyes, not believing that he didn't understand what he was talking about. Are you two having issues already? Oh, no, nothing like that. Then why are you here? You both practically begged for a day off so you could fix up the apartment to suit both your tastes. And now you're saying you need to get away? Well, it's not a big deal, Recker said. It's not like we're arguing or styles clashing or anything. Then what is it? It's more or less me. I guess it's a little harder than I thought it'd be. Seeing everything transform from my way of doing things to a more pleasant atmosphere will take some getting used to. Perhaps you're not as ready for this as you thought you were, Jones said. No, that's not it. I love her. I do. This is what I want. She's what I want. It's just, I've spent a lot of years doing things one way, my way, not having to worry about what someone else would like or think. You'll adjust? I know. I just hope I don't drive her crazy in the process. Or me. So is there still nothing on the agenda? Recker said. No, we're still clear. Since he was there and didn't have anywhere else to go, Recker sat down at the desk and went on the computer. He figured he'd just sit for a couple of hours doing busy work, trying to occupy some time before he went back home. So how long do you plan on continuing this little charade of yours and sitting here? Jones said. I don't know. 2 or 3 hours, maybe? Why, want to get rid of me already? No, just wondering. Jones also sat back down, though he had more definitive plans for his day. There were still a few cases that he was running down information on, but they would probably still be a day or two away from acting on anything. His main goal for the day was finishing up on something that he'd been hiding from Recker. It was nothing like the last secret he was hiding from him, about Agent 17. This time, he assumed Recker would be pleased. At least, he hoped so. After all, it was Recker's idea. Finding another agent to work with in their little group was something they'd discussed previously, and Recker knew Jones had started doing some work on it. Jones never divulged his progress or indicated how close he really was. Jones altered his search methods somewhat this time, though. If there was anything that he learned from Recker's situation, it was that he didn't want to get another former agent who was in hot water. This time, Jones focused his efforts on finding ex-CIA agents who were no longer employed with the agency, but were still in good standing. That way, they would never have to worry about being tracked or worry about being found. After an exhaustive search over the past several months, Jones finally targeted someone, firmly believing that he found his man. Jones hadn't made any plans on when or how he'd tell Recker, though. He figured it would be more of a feeling-out process. Recker obviously wasn't good with change, and even though he initially seemed on board with the idea, Jones wasn't sure it'd be good to spring it on him now with the changes he had going on with Mia. But it was also something that he needed Recker's approval on. If they brought in someone new, it had to be someone they could both work with, someone they had chemistry with, especially Recker. If they were out in the field, Recker had to feel comfortable that a new person would have his back, that he could trust him. That was no small feat. When it came to calling on the new recruit, Jones wanted Recker to be there to get his thoughts. Recker was good with initial encounters and getting a feel on how people were. Jones decided he'd wait a few more days before talking to Recker about it. He just felt that now wasn't the best time to make Recker's life even more chaotic. He'd give Recker some time to adjust to living with Mia and being in what was basically a brand new apartment. It was going to be tough for Jones, though, not to spill the beans on what he thought was an exciting development.